Welcome everyone to the May 13th Sustainability Working Group meeting. I'd like to start off with the land acknowledgements. So I'll read that for everybody here. We have gathered in Wilmot Township on the traditional territory of the Neutral, Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and Mississauga peoples. We also want to acknowledge the importance of the Dish with One Spoon Covenant, a peace agreement made between the Indigenous nations before the Europeans arrived. It characterizes our collective responsibility to each other and Mother Earth. We should only take what we need, leave enough for others, and keep the dish clean. By acknowledging this covenant and the First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples, we are reminded of our important connection to this land where we live, learn, and work together as a community. Okay, are there any disclosures of pecuniary interests under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act?
None.
All right. Okay, your previous meeting minutes. Has everyone taken a chance to look through those? Okay, can I have someone move that? Or are there any issues with it? May I ask first? None. So can I have someone move that, please? Moved by John, second by Bruce, and then all in favor? Carried. Yeah. Okay. So I'm just going to make a note here for the minutes. Okay, and I'd like to introduce everybody, our new committee member, Dean. So Dean, we've met already, so I'm the manager of finance of the Township of Wilmot. So maybe you can give a quick introduction, and then we can kind of go around Dean here, and everyone else can introduce themselves.
Okay, thanks, Ashton. Great to join you. So I'm living in New Hamburg. I retired about a year and a half ago. We lived in Winnipeg for about 2 decades, and then came back to Waterloo Region for retirement. Settled into New Hamburg. I am involved with the Nith Valley Eco Boosters and also with Let's Tree Wilmot, and really looking forward to the opportunity to work with you in this committee and to get to know what's happening here better.
Thanks, Dean. All right, so maybe we'll start with you, John.
John Jordan, live in downtown Wilmot Center. I'm a member at large, I guess, just as you are, and local business entrepreneur people that we are, and always real keen interest in sustainability, solar, wind, water, and so forth. So very much a passion.
Okay. Harold?
I'm Harold Okrafka, Director of Development Services for the Township of Wilmot. But more importantly to you, I lived at Grable for 4 years and was student president, but I don't know if we ever crossed paths. I was 86 to 90, so I know your name from Grable, but I don't know that we ever crossed paths. But
okay, yeah.
So just and I live in New Hamburg. I live in New Hamburg as well. So.
And Bruce.
Bruce Beckler, plumbing and HVAC tech for the township.
All right, thanks, Bruce. All right, well, Dean, we're excited to have you aboard. So we'll get moving through the agenda and have a very open dynamic. So if you have questions, feel free to kind of just raise your hand and we'll attend to them.
Yeah, I have a few things that I wanted to ask the committee, but I assume the agenda item of sort of roundtable is a time to do that, right?
Yeah, and then if there's things that that might be applicable to one of the agenda items, feel free to ask it then as well. Okay, so we'll move forward through the agenda. So we'll start off with the business area. So the Zero Emission Vehicle Infrastructure Program, as far as the EV charging stations. So compared to the last meeting, we do have Tova here, so I'm not here.
I'm here. Can you hear me? It's Tova.
Hi, Tova. We hear you.
Great. I'm just going to mute because I'm in the car.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So the update for the ZVIP program, there's no update since the last committee meeting. I believe they're still, if not complete, the tendering stages. And I'll provide another update once I hear more. But I haven't heard very much since then. The sustainability work program. So the only thing on the item right now is the sustainability calendar, and Leslie is not here. and the sustainability annual report. That's the other item, and that's also an agenda item. So I'll address that one later on. Appointment of a new secretary. I'd like to talk about that once the whole committee is here. So we are missing, I believe, 3 members today. So hopefully when there's at our next meeting, we'll have perhaps 8 or 9 here, and then we'll address that topic then. So that brings us to the greenhouse gas emissions update. So at the last committee meeting, I kind of alluded to the fact that the data wasn't complete. It is now, and I did send an email update, but I do have some data here available that I'd like to share with everybody, and it's quite interesting. I've kind of broken down what our emissions were last year by facility and also by type. So, and also show the overall chart. So we'll start with the big picture. I'm going to share my screen. So if you guys can let me know that you can see that. Just give me a second. Okay, so it should be up now. Can you guys see the chart there?
Yep.
Perfect.
Yes.
Okay. So our emissions over 2021, as expected, exceeded our greenhouse gas reduction target. And as alluded to at the last meeting, we did, due to COVID-19, the facility closures, we did experience, probably lower utilities usage, and same thing, the fuel consumption on our fleet vehicles. So that brought us to, I apologize for all the numbers over here, 1176 tons compared to just over 1,300 tons. So that does bring us to 30% in comparison to the 25%. So as discussed at the last meeting, in part of the annual report, I always give an update of our progress on the prior year. So with that, I would provide kind of an asterisk to kind of explain that, yes, we exceed the target, but we don't know under normal circumstances where we truly do lie. However, it might be an appropriate time. Maybe we'll see how 2021 pans out to maybe look at revising our greenhouse gas target. But for the time being, I think maybe it's best to stay status quo and just see how 2021 looks like. So you can see here the red line does kind of denote where our target was, kind of at an equal level approach out to 2027. So we've exceeded that already. So I do have a breakdown based on the type of consumption we've had. So it's broken down between fuel, which is gasoline and diesel, electricity, natural gas, and propane. So natural gas and propane are kind of tied together, the gas component, the fuel component, and the electrical component. So overall, you can see natural gas is our biggest consumer at 62%, or really just over, about 75% if you include the, oh, sorry, that's not propane. Propane is 5%, so 67% as far as gas usage for our facilities. So that's our biggest contributor. So mainly heat. So as far as when we look further down the road, maybe throughout the year, as far as efforts to reduce corporately, this is probably I would say, most certainly our biggest area where I guess concern needs to, or not concern, but emphasis needs to be placed on. And I know HVAC replacement is always an ongoing process, and we do have a big project that is occurring at our administration complex, and I would hope that with those efforts, we'd see some of that decline there as well. Any questions on this chart before I move to the next slide, Harold?
Sorry. The propane, is that the work shed that runs on the propane? Is that, because I was trying to picture which of our facilities would be using propane.
I believe propane is I don't know if there's any community centers that are on propane in Hayesville, but also I believe it might incorporate any propane usage. I don't believe if we have any forklifts or similar device or equipment that would consume propane, I believe at the WRC. So that would include that as well.
It's the old Zamboni.
Okay, perfect.
And I think, or I'm not actually sure if any of the equipment out back possibly is propane. I don't know. Okay. Hayesville is oil.
Oil, oh, right, that is oil, right.
And I'm not sure. I think most of it must be from the Zamboni.
Okay. So yeah, then I believe then propane would be under vehicle or equipment. So then I think that would fall under
Yeah.
two. It would be coupled with the propane, gasoline, and diesel. So I think just looking at that natural gas, then backpedaling a little bit, 62%. Dean, you had a question?
Carry on. I'll have a question about greenhouse gas, but not specifically on this graph.
Oh, perfect. So I went through earlier, and apologize if this I'm going to try and make it as big as I can. I did go together, aggregated all of our data. So it's split into several facilities. So we have our WRC, Public Works, Fire Department, all of our community centers, our administration building, parks, I believe the old arena in New Hamburg, streetlights, lift stations, and other. So at the top, our biggest consumer is our WRC at 502 tons. So you can see a big part of this chart here is the majority of with respect to our emissions. And then followed by our Public Works Department, where their biggest consumption is fuel, which makes sense because of their plows and other equipment out there, utility trucks and so on. So that amounts to 285 tons or 286 tons. And then the next is our fire department, which is natural gas for our facilities, and also our the fuel consumption on those, which isn't significant. It's about 29 tons. Followed by our community centers, which really is it's an aggregate of everything, and our administration building, and followed by the rest there. So I guess looking at the most of what the most intensity is overall, it is certainly our natural gas consumption at the WRC at 463 tons.
Those 2 darn swimming pools.
So yeah, I have the data there. I intend later on the report, I'm going to talk a little bit more about the annual report, but I do intend to kind of include this little new chart here of where our emissions are coming from. And obviously this original chart that I usually do for the overall picture. I may not include this chart because it can get a little complicated because there's a lot of data sets in there. Yeah, if there's any questions, I can also filter down based on as far as the visual representation on the community centers or whichever facility. John, sorry, John, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just, well, at the rec center, the natural gas being the big part of it, and as Harold said, with the swimming pools, has there been a cost benefit analysis done if we were to look at whether it be geothermal, whether it be solar or whatever, instead of that, and what the payback period would be?
That's a good question.
That's a huge, like, obviously that's a huge significant portion of it. And if that could be reduced in some way, shape, or form, that would be certainly more favorable.
Absolutely. So as far as the solar goes, I don't believe it would be feasible at this time based on the last solar assessment we had. Now, that was just for the overall community center. I don't know, actually, the facility. I don't know if there's any other technology that can tie directly to the pool, but
probably more.
So Ashton,
yep.
There's solar water heating. You can do preheating of water using solar. It's not using solar panels. It's actually a solar water heater, which go on the roof.
Bruce, do you know anything about any assessments done to that degree?
No, not really.
Okay.
Might be something to look into.
Yeah.
That's good. I'll make a note. Maybe I'll just leave it with the director of parks, facilities, and recreation with her to see if there's room in her work program to maybe, and let her know that is the biggest driver. Almost, we're getting in the neighborhood of almost 50% of the overall emissions there, right? So
yeah, oh, it's huge. And then the next one being diesel under Public Works, but that's pretty tough to get away from at this point.
Yeah, with respect to the specs of the vehicles,
yeah,
I agree as well.
Unless Elon Musk has an electric snowplow.
Are there any other, and I'm just going to flag this for later on in the conversation. We're also considering, not considering, but hopefully we get to this point, greenhouse gas emissions credits applied to that, which ties into the wetlands project, but we'll leave that for later in the conversation of how that may tie into our emissions overall corporately. Okay. Are there any other questions on this? Okay, perfect. So next is the 80 by 50 project update. So the last meeting, we had a presentation from Samantha Tremmel from Climate Action Waterloo on the 80 by 50 project. So that plan is intended to go to our council, I believe, on June 14th. And similarly with all the area municipalities within the same time frame as well. At the last meeting, we didn't, as a committee, move forward a motion to support the plan, just because it wasn't finalized at the time. But as far as the final document, that isn't made, it's not public yet. So the option here is for us, and since we don't have a meeting within a time frame before the next council meeting that the plan would go for, I would seek the committee's support on the climate action project initiative, not particularly the plan, because we're not the final draft isn't before us, but I was hoping that we can pass a motion as a committee that we do support the 80 by 50 project as a whole, and then it'll be formally brought to council, and we'll notify them that the sustainability working group supports the project, but the final approval or endorsement, whatever it may be made at the council level. So
Can I just chime in? I happen to be at the Waterloo SAC meeting, Sustainability Advisory Committee meeting this morning. And they actually did pass a motion endorsing or encouraging council to approve the report. The only real fundamental changes, and Ashton, you can talk to this as well as I can, to the plan from the community consultation, the bigger things were a deeper integration of justice and an encouragement for advocacy to higher levels of government for support of this work and further work to go even deeper than the shorter term projection. So just as a note, there are other advisory committees that are passing motions to support approval or to encourage approval or something of that ilk. And if and when it comes time to vote, I will abstain, considering that I'm deeply embedded in this one.
Right. Okay, so I did draft a quick little one, and everyone, please feel free to provide feedback on it if we don't want it. But the motion would be pretty simple. It says that the sustainability working group supports the 80/50 by project managed by Climate Action Waterloo Region.
I'll move that.
Okay, moved by Dean, second by John. All in favor? And any opposed? And those abstaining, Tova?
Yeah.
Ashton, can I just make a comment here?
Absolutely.
With respect to this? One of the things that I'm wondering about, I think currently, as I understand it, we're on a 25 by 30 by 25 goal, right? 30% reduction or 25% reduction by 2030.
As far as the township goes?
As far as the township, yes.
So yeah, ours is by 2027. I think that was before this, but go on. Yeah.
So the federal budget that came down last month puts much more ambitious goals here. I think something over 40% reduction by 2030. And so one of the things I'm wondering about in terms of as a township is what the implications are for us. I mean, for real change to happen like that, it's not just tinkering around the edges. It means we have to do some fairly serious stuff. And the real work will happen at community levels, not at federal levels or necessarily even provincial, I think. So as this 80 by 50 plan is going to council, I'm wondering if there might also be some other message that we want to send about to council around, if we're really serious about this, we have to be working in a much more aggressive way, quickly. And that might tie into the previous discussion we had a few minutes ago about the rec center and, looking at some other options around that or so forth. I don't know, but I think it just seems to me like it's a good time to go to council with a message of not just endorsing the 80 by 50, sort of in concept, but sometime in the next short while, we really need to make this real for us as a community, as a township.
Absolutely, that's a good point. So there are to be other recommendations. I will share them with the committee. So I believe that all the municipalities are going to try and bring a similar recommendation. Now there are specific things within the plan that, as you would have seen, there's some municipalities that have different actions that are specific to them, whereby in their recommendation it would address those ones specifically as well. I think through that, I can't remember them off the top of my head because they're still being worked on. I do have a meeting about it on Monday, but I'll share those recommendations. And as far as our overall emissions target is, I do think we can put that on the work program for the committee to potentially look at maybe aligning it. I'm just throwing stuff out there right now with the plan with respect to their intermediary targets, like I believe it's 30% by 2030. So maybe making that alignment or even going above and beyond that as well. But I think as far as that specifically, I don't think we have enough time between now and the next meeting to make a reasonable target. But I do think probably throughout the rest of this year, we can make that something we work on and look at our 10-year plan and say, okay, what are these impacts going to be? When do we know what's going to happen? And then where would we also like to see in addition to all these things? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I wasn't suggesting going with a specific target next month, but rather with a message that simply a message to council that we really need to move very aggressively on this, much more aggressively than what I think people are probably thinking or assuming.
Right, absolutely.
Part of an action.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say that the motion that came from Waterloo SAC was, that they encourage them to approve, endorse, whatever, and that urgent, immediate action should be taken, and that they are directing staff to begin creating work plans, et cetera, et cetera. I could ask the chair of that. I don't chair the committee, but I could ask the chair of the committee for the exact language. If we are allowed to pass something by email, I'm sure I could get it within. Well, I might be able to get it within this meeting because I just arrived home, so I'll get on my computer in a second. But to try to get that, to see, because it was to this conversation point about immediate action, immediate work plans, getting this integrated into pieces. Like there was a bit of depth to it.
Okay. I was going to say maybe some actionable items for this and going forward to give us more of a sense of what, like if we made a change, say, I don't know, at the rec center, say there's the roof solar heating, preheating we could do, Bruce, like how many tons does that reduce our greenhouse gases by? So that gives us an idea of, what chunks maybe we can bite off and take on as projects to hit goals that we want to hit too. Because right now, I really have no clue. Like if we added a set of solar panels to the roof, how many tons of greenhouse gas is that going to reduce it by? And these are maybe some things, actionable items that we need someone with knowledge about that to tell us what it could be.
Fair point. So hopefully maybe Tova can provide us some insight and on the recommendations, if anything, and then we'll do that. But as now I'll put that motion in, but there will be other recommendations more specifically in that report, and I will share that with the committee before it goes, because it will be kind of a committee report. So I'll share that with everybody. Okay, so we'll move on to the next agenda item, fishing line recycling program. Some resident in New Hamburg did reach out to the Parks and Facilities department, and I did touch base with him. So he, this local resident, and I mean, I don't know if it's up yet already, but there's a lot of fishing line in the Nith River and other bodies of water within the township. So he's been working with Jeff Drubrick, our manager of Parks and Facilities, to create how do I say it? A contraption, whatever the word might be, to collect fishing line that might be in the river and put it in this little tube. It'll be on a post throughout various areas. I don't know where specifically they've worked on these things, but it's a good just local environmental initiative that they're moving forward with, whereby the remaining fishing line would be taken to a tackle shop, and most tackle shops do take will recycle the line. I don't know what they do specifically with it, but now there's essentially there would be disposal areas for used fishing line. Any questions on that? Awesome. Okay, tree canopies. So we had some inquiries. I know, Dean, you sent along an email, and we had another email from another resident regarding tree canopies. So I'll kind of pass it off to Harold since it's under his work program, and yeah, you can provide more information on what's going on there.
Thanks, Ashton. So yeah, it is it's a multiple department work plan item. Development Services is the lead. Basically, there's lots of talk about trees, planting more trees, preserving trees, and what we do across various departments. So there's, certainly planning and dealing with site plan approvals, subdivision approvals. We deal a lot with, depending on the site. For example, there was development in New Hamburg where, we required them to hire an arborist to look at mature trees to preserve them. Every site's a little different. Public Works deals with street tree planting, pruning, maintaining. Parks and Rec obviously has a lot of trails and forests that they maintain and operate. So the first step is to plan to pull all the different policies from all the different departments in terms of anything related to trees and try to consolidate that, tying in regional policies, the regional tree bylaw. And from that, then look for similarities, gaps, huge gaping holes in our policies, and then move forward. Ideally, it'll have public consultation with various groups, including the public. Let's Tree Wilmot, Newth Valley Eco Boosters, regional environmental staff as well, Trails Wilmot, to look at how we can do better, what we're doing well, what we're doing better. I gave Ashton a graphic on something I think we've done actually really well at. A lot of people will probably be surprised, maybe not. But it's just a little graphic to show that certainly Wilmot has behind the scenes made, considerable active efforts over the last 22 years, I guess, to acquire and protect forests, in particular the corridor between Baden and New Hamburg. What you're seeing, anything in green is been acquired by the township in the last 22 years, largely through development approvals, but not always. And the yellow surrounded by green is a piece of land. So basically we've acquired 145 acres of forests between Baden and New Hamburg over the last 22 years. There's another 5 acres that through a future development would be acquired. And there's really only a 10-acre parcel that certainly would be on our radar for acquisition if it would work. But there's no active opportunity currently for us to acquire that. But just as a graphic sort of show, Wilmot actually has really made efforts. We have a forest out at the township gravel pit that we also own. So part of this process would get into things like, should we be doing a forest management plan for all of our woodlets that we own to start maintaining underplanting, building biodiversity. Certainly, as we saw at Schmidt Woods and at our alpine forest, even on Loschinger, the impacts of the ash borer were significant. It's fine to have cut it down, but what are we going to do moving forward as part of our tree policy to ensure that we do underplanting and we rebuild those forests and protect against the next great invasion of whatever species of disease we have to deal with. So again, that's the kind of what we're looking at. We are looking, I don't know a start date for when those policies will be pulled together. We'll need to do that shortly. It will take some time, but the end result will be good. Things like the wetlands, which comes up a lot. It hits a lot of different subjects that we deal with, certainly. We were happy to be out there. Mike Scout created a partnership with Forests Ontario, who manages the federal program, and GRCA, who contributed the planting equipment. to plant 4,000, actually 4,200 was the final count. I don't know that they actually counted every single tree that went in, but I know they bundle them in tens. So native species, cedars, red maple, silver maple, white pine, white spruce, and then native shrubs as well, dogwood and such. So that was exciting to see that happening, and certainly over time as that grows, we'll certainly, hopefully, and it's another subject I think that Ashton's going to raise, but measuring that and seeing what the impact is. Carbon sinks, I don't have the number in front of me. I think it's 6 tons per mature hectare of trees is what some scientists estimate the offset is. Obviously that's incremental. From day one, they start growing, they start sequestering carbon, as will the pollinator meadows. I circulated an article to Ashton earlier today that a councillor shared on Twitter, talking about how marshlands and wetlands are the great hope for Canada as part of the climate change fight. And so I thought that was an interesting article, that there are certainly universities out there studying the mat of a pollinative meadow. What does that generate in terms of carbon sequestration? So that just gives you a flavor of where we're heading with this. I don't have the answers yet, but we do know that many departments have policies on how they deal with our tree canopy, and we want to look at how those policies fit together, and then an overall policy for the township moving forward on how to increase our tree canopy, but also how to protect it long term and build that biodiversity that's important, so we don't end up where we have entire streets of trees dying. And so there's a brief, try to answer any questions you might have, but hopefully that gave you a bit of an overview of where we're hoping to head with this.
Harold, have they started to cull the ash trees yet in those bushes?
Yeah, certainly Schmidt Woods and Loshinger Woods, and across beside Alpine Plant Foods kind of looks like a war zone. Schmidt Woods has come back. There's been a lot of recreation staff have put a lot of time into tidying that up, cleaning it up, and the other woodlots are on the radar, as with the Trails Group. I think the Trails Group is also looking at volunteering in those projects to help. So hopefully that improves. And then with Let's Tree Wilmot's resources and finding sites to do additional plantings. And I know I'm pretty sure I've seen posts on Facebook at least that Let's Tree Wilmot's also looking at trying to do a canopy survey, I believe, to look at the township to see what level of forest cover we have. And certainly that's something that we would want to tie into this process, and whether there's resources that we can bring to that group or that group can bring to the township. So we're working collaboratively on the same projects rather than heading in 2 different directions trying to get the same number. Usually isn't overly productive.
Well, that was one of my questions, Harold, and thanks for the helpful background, is whether there's been any work done or talk about work done on a research of what's the current tree canopy in Wilmot. And certainly less tree Wilmot, we talked about we need to do this if we're going to set any goals for going forward. But has there been any attempt at any point in the recent past to do a sort of baseline of what is the tree canopy in Wilmot Township?
Sorry, we haven't done that yet, but it's certainly one of the things that we know is going to be an action item once we create that background of here's all our policies. In general, I think Wilmot historically has tried to plant as many trees as we can, but not at the scale of, say, the Wetlands project, which obviously I'm pretty excited about, where we're actually planting forests with the goal to sequester carbon, but also build that tree canopy. It's a project in the early stages. When we first discussed it at this committee, actually, I don't have that map here, but there are a number of properties throughout Wilmot that the township or the region owns that, quite frankly, are near the river and generally farmed with corn. Not that there's anything wrong with corn, but I think regionally and township wise, we have a lot of properties that if we pick up this model at the Wetlands and drop it on other sites in Wilmot, we could make, I think, substantial change in public policy in terms of how we treat these lands and the river quality. Like it flows into so many other things pesticides, herbicides, simply the siltation that comes off when the flood comes up on these floodlands and washes the soil into the river. It all impacts river quality. So
will that help with a bit of flood mitigation maybe as well with that too?
Well, and that's the hope. Certainly, in theory, having the floods come up on the wetlands and be captured and held would seem to reduce, even at a small amount, what goes through New Hamburg during the height of the flood. And also the stormwater. All of the stormwater to the Arboretum, to the tracks in New Hamburg, flows through the wetlands property, goes into that pond. In a heavy rainfall, the pond comes up and the overflow drains it straight into the Nith River. At the same time, all the other lands are draining straight into the Nith River. So even in situations like that, the design over time is hope that we can take that overflow and stop it from going straight into the river untreated and unabated and bring it into the wetlands, where it can slowly percolate its way through, weave back and forth, cool its temperature, clean it, and then hopefully infiltrate into the Nith rather than a direct channel to the Nith. Oh, we're getting a picture. There you go. So that channel that comes from that large pond pretty much drives in a heavy flow straight into the Nith, all the water. And the goal will be in time to create a different overflow that flows into the wetlands. Phil Holst, who grew up in New Dundee, is designing these for us. He works extensively with the wetlands projects in Oxford County, but he's graciously assisting Mr. Scout and the committee in terms of designing this so that it really will be quite a spectacular resource to the township and serve, hopefully, as I said, as a framework or a template to pick up and drop on other properties of various sizes. As you can see, there's a property we don't own immediately to the south across the tracks. That would be a great property to pick up the model and drop it there. Again, a cornfield right adjacent to the Nith that probably has a higher, better use to the residents of the community. So I don't know if you've seen this concept before. The red line is a trail / boardwalk that will be created to give residents and children in particular up close and personal with nature, some lookouts at the Nith, so that they can see turtle habitat and snake habitat and all the various birds that we hope to attract. The yellow is the pollinative meadow. The darker green areas are the reforestation areas, and then the lighter green is sort of tall stock and shrubs. And over time, we think it's going to be a showpiece for the community and a good first foray for the township into green infrastructure, if you want to call it that, or looking at treating our green economy as an asset. So asset management wise, I know Ashton's group in the finance department are beginning to look at how we assign a value to these green infrastructure assets. So lots of exciting new things to add to the mix. And I probably talk too much, but it is something that I'm really excited about seeing this come to fruition for Wilmot.
I have a question. Why is there a parking lot there when there's no road?
There actually is. There is a driveway that comes in now. So the red line around the pond also serves as the access route for maintenance of the pond, for when sediments need to be pulled. Again, all the stormwater north of the tracks comes pretty much through that pipe and ends up in this pond. So you can imagine what all it's carrying and what we want to get rid of, but we do need to dig that out from time to time. So the access to the street network was taken intentionally wide so that it would provide a future access. When we took these lands almost 20 years ago, we knew we wanted it to be something recreational. We weren't sure. Soccer park was talked about. Usually, municipality has bad experience with building soccer fields on floodplains, as all of us who have raised our kids in minor soccer will attest to. The grass grows quick and the kids come home muddy. But so over time, this has been developed as the concept of what seems to make sense for this property. The parking area will allow all residents to enjoy it. We're hoping to have lots of people bike to the site. We're not trying to focus on vehicles. It is accessible for most people in New Hamburg to walk to. But we do want to encourage all residents of Wilmot to enjoy this space and be able to come, school groups, school bus to come, and children can help plant, children can learn about ecosystems, various ecosystems. And the design of these ponds is based on that Phil's trying to have some that would be deep ponds to attract a certain type of bird or a certain kind of amphibian, others with, shallower areas and deeper areas, all those various features that through his experience, he's found create a really interesting landscape for the public to enjoy, while at the same term, obviously serving as a functional resource in terms of how we manage stormwater moving forward. And we're hoping this model may be incorporated into future greenfield developments in terms of not just putting in a standard pond, but requiring a higher order of treatment within those developments as well.
What's the timeline on this, Harold?
We're having really good luck in the approvals process. GRCA is awaiting the drawings, cross-section drawings to show the excavation of the ponds where those soils will be placed strategically. The hope is that the project can be completed without having to bring in any materials from off-site, save and except for obviously the boardwalks and the plantings, but soils and gravels, those materials, we're hoping that the project would be stay on this site. And we're hoping those approvals may be in place that midsummer to late summer, the excavation of the ponds may be able to occur. That's faster than what we originally were under the impression, but I think it's fair to say GRCA is pretty excited about this project too. It ticks a lot of boxes in a whole lot of lists for a whole lot of people in terms of how we should be dealing with our environment moving forward.
Nice.
And just if I can add additional tall stock plantings in that this fall, and certainly hoping that the pandemic, although it's been extended a couple more weeks of the lockdown, that the restrictions would be lifted so the entire community can come out and participate and be part of this, and that it really is a community project that everybody can embrace and feel a part of. So that's an important goal, certainly for Mr. Scout. He's made it clear that he wants to see, in particular, our youth and our next generations planting trees and being part of this, so that they can pass this knowledge on to their children, and it really becomes part of what our fabric of society does with properties like this.
Sounds great. And certainly there are a lot of people who are interested in just going out and digging holes and planting trees. With Let's Tree Wilmot, we keep having people who want to volunteer to do this, but with pandemic restrictions, we haven't been able to do any public plantings this spring. So we're just waiting for that to take place. Yeah,
I planted 200 and just about 250 on my own property, and certainly was wishing I could have invited Let's Tree Wilmot to come do it for me.
Well,
back gets, I didn't have a tractor to do it with. It was all by hand. The back gets a little sore. It was exciting for about the first 20, and then it kind of became more of a chore than a labor of love. But
well, if you have more of that, let us know. And I'll confess that there were a few people who just happened to show up to help a farmer on a recent Saturday plant some seedlings. So
good.
All right, thanks, Harold, for the overview there. It's extensive, and I'm excited for this project too. It's awesome. So while we're on this topic, we kind of transition from the tree canopy to this, which makes sense. So Harold did kind of lightly touch on it. Look, and it circles back to the greenhouse gas emissions review and target overall, whereby we would look at the emissions impact of this wetlands project. So we did reach out to at Sustainable Water Region, and she's going to be referring us to potential consulting companies, whereby we would just inquire with them what kind of services they can provide with respect to providing an assessment of what is the impact, even like of how the trees are now, and then progressively throughout once the trees mature more. So they do need for their program kind of a third-party review before we apply that emissions credit for our overall emissions. So I'm not sure how that process would look particularly, but I think that's going to be step one, unless there's anyone on the committee that has any ideas of how we can go about that. We're certainly open to that. So through that, it also is double, there's a double benefit with it. So the township would understand what the emissions are going to be. It'll help our greenhouse gas emissions credit overall, but it also serve the education piece that comes part of this project, so that it can be an FYI that, hey, did you know these 4,000 trees will, contribute to X reduction in emissions? So there's a lot of different ways it can kind of go, and certainly is beneficial. So that piece is kind of as its infancy, but I think we're moving down the road to kind of see where we can go with that. Any questions or ideas around that? Okay, awesome. So we'll keep you up to date. So Harold and I are in touch with the reps, so we'll see where that goes. All right. So we'll go back down the agenda. There is the next one is the Climate Action Awareness Fund. So there's a fund available by the federal government that was circulated. I don't believe I provided a link to that fund directly, but I can provide it after in an email update to the committee. So it's a fund essentially that focuses on supports. This is the quote from their website. It supports projects that strengthen Canada's science capacity to identify, accelerate, and evaluate mitigation actions that will work towards achieving net zero greenhouse gas emissions. So one of the projects where we did think that this potentially could tie into the greenhouse gas impacts with tree planting on this in this particular area, and then Harold had the idea that it could potentially be a collaborative approach between SWR and potentially University of Waterloo. Unfortunately, the program isn't eligible for municipalities, so it'd be more for not-for-profits, universities, and community groups. So I'll leave that there. I don't know, Harold, do you have anything further to add on that potential idea?
No, I think you covered it well. Again, once we find out what's required to measure, it could be maybe, even one of, Eco Boosters or Let's Tree Wilmot, maybe, if they could qualify to apply, work, if we can get the federal government to pay to measure the carbon sequestration effect of, say, the Wetlands project, I'll take their money for that. That'd be a great project for Wilmot, I think.
Dean, is that anything in Let's Tree Wilmot's? Have you ever done an assessment similar to something to that degree, or?
We have not. I mean, Let's Tree Wilmot is a very new group, basically about a year old, and trying to get going during COVID, which has been also its own set of challenges. But certainly there's a lot of enthusiasm in terms of volunteer interest, good response in terms of some of the initial fundraising that we've been doing. So I certainly think it's something that we could look at and talk about the possibility of some sort of collaborative research project and trying to get some university capacity or whatever. I'd be happy to talk further with you about that, Harold.
Okay, awesome. Any further questions on that? Okay, awesome. So we'll move on to the next one. Annual update report to council. So I've kind of sprinkled a little bit about it throughout the meeting. So with the biggest piece, our annual report is going to go the same night that we intend to bring the climate action plan. Tova also that night will do her SWR annual update as well, in addition to the presentation for that climate action project. So part of that annual report that we'll supply, it's this generally the standard report, and I just wanted to open up to the committee if there's anything that you feel that should be included, that maybe was like this is an important one that we should include. I will circulate the draft once I do finalize that. We do have about a month until it goes, so I'm hoping to get it done in the next 2 weeks, and I'll circulate it accordingly. But I know there will be kind of certainly a disclaimer, certainly around the greenhouse gas emissions that we've experienced in 2020. And also there's a number of initiatives that were kind of pushed back because of COVID-19 efforts, as it kind of impacted the overall work program of the township as well. So that's kind of where I am at. So if there anyone has any suggestions, please feel to send them now, or if there's any ideas that come to mind after the meeting, please feel free to shoot me an email. Okay, so there's no correspondence, and the roundtable information sharing we did talk about. I did have here slated for the tree planting. We did discuss that about the greenhouse emissions. So that there's nothing else from me. So we can go around, see if anyone has any other things they'd like to share. Well, maybe we'll start with you, Dean. I think you're muted, Dean. Still muted.
Word document. Okay, sorry about that. One of the things I was interested in is, does the Wilmot Township have any kind of overarching sustainability statement policy? I mean, there is a environmental preservation section in the strategic plan, but I was curious and wondering whether there's anything that's sort of an overarching policy statement that the municipality has adopted with respect to the environment.
Outside of the strategic plan, I can't come up with anything. Maybe I'd defer that to Harold if you know anything.
I don't have it memorized, but there definitely are some overarching statements within the official plan that I could pull up and send to the group. But off the top of my head, I don't have them memorized, as I said. But definitely there are some, I'd say, very high level statements that would be made. But
okay, that'd be great. I'd like to see that. I was sort of poking around a bit in the website and trying to find things, and I may have missed some things. The other question I had was if for a bit more information about the rain barrel project that was referenced in, I think, previous minutes, but can you just, someone give a brief synopsis as to what that is?
I can if you want, Ashton. So we were working last year, Scott Cressman, who former Hayesville resident, is the water efficiency coordinator for the region of Waterloo. So the region has always done rain barrel distribution program. Yeah. The first year, I think it was at Heidelberg and some more rural locations, but for the last number of years, I think it's pretty much at the three big malls, Fairview, Conestoga, and I don't know which one in Cambridge. John Galt Center is what I would call it, but it's probably not called that anymore. I'm showing my age. Anyway, so we had made a request as a committee on whether we could get in on that and have, I believe it was 100 rain barrels distributed last April for Earth Day at WRC. We were going to volunteer and I think charge $20, which pretty much paid the region for their costs. So it wasn't a moneymaker or anything, just to try to give rural residents an opportunity to get them without having to drive into the city. And then COVID hit and it got shut down. Originally, they were thinking they would do it in the fall, and it got shut down again. The region hires a contractor to do that distribution program, so we were going to just serve as that. But I have not had discussions with Scott this year. My guess is obviously it's probably still delayed until the lockdown would end. But I can follow up on that. Certainly, it's something for the municipality that it definitely was an opportunity where it didn't cost anything. It was more just putting in the labor to distribute them, and Ashton was going to set up the pin pad machine at WRC so people could drive in. We'd give them the barrel, they pay, and away they go.
Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you. That's all I have.
Oh, perfect. Great, thanks, Dean. We'll go across my screen here. John? Nothing? Okay. Awesome.
Sorry, no, I blanked this week or this month.
Great. And we'll go down. Tova?
The biggest things are climate action going to councils, which you already talked about, Ashton, and our evening of recognition is on the 27th of May. I almost said April, but we are no longer in April. 27th of May. It's a free online event, so please come, share, tell everyone to come. Actually trying to do it on Hopin to see if we can make it more interactive than just some of the other ways you can do them, and then really hoping next year we can do it in person. So April 27th online, go to our website, please come.
And I'll, when I do the follow-up email, I'll send a link to everybody. Okay, and Bruce?
No, nothing.
Nothing. And Harold? Nothing. Awesome. Okay, well, thank you, everyone. So we'll stop it there. So let's get a motion to adjourn and move on. So I'll be moved by John. Okay, thank you, everyone. Please enjoy the rest of the sunny day.
Thanks, everyone.
See you later, guys.